My name is Melanie Harris. I am a strategy director for Complete College America. I work predominantly with the Midwest and New England regions and work closely with our momentum year and 15 to finish strategies. I want to welcome you to CCA Live. Each session that we have features experts who will provide you with valuable insight and information as we continue to navigate these unprecedented times. We'll continuously update our website with new information and encourage you to bookmark the link, share it with your friends, and your colleagues across the nation for valuable information. Last year, we celebrated 10 years as an organization committed to advancing college from access to completion. And our CCA Live series is one way where we honor the promise by engaging higher education community in critical conversations about higher education and the completion agenda. We acknowledge that you are consumed with requests and meetings for Zoom meetings and are heavily connected to our computers right now. And so we're very grateful that you're choosing to spend your time with us today. At CCA, we're leveraging our alliance of states and implementing strategies across the country to boost graduation rates and ensure that every student has the opportunity to achieve their dreams with equity in mind. I am sharing our map of our strategy directors with me and two of my other colleagues, Dr. Brandon Protas and Nicola Hewitt. We're each assigned to a region and look forward to connecting with you. We'll share how you can get in contact with us at the end of the session today. And as we're going through the session, please take note of what our panelists are sharing, and we would be happy to have follow-up conversations to implement some of the things that we discussed today within your state or institution. So today's session is Amplifying Student Voices. It's a dialogue between students and higher education leaders. We have 5 great panelists on the call today, and I'll let them introduce themselves in a minute. But the reality is that students, faculty, and staff are very anxious to return to campus beginning in a few short weeks. Our discussion today is aimed at centering the student perspective. The panelists are not necessarily representing their specific institutions, but more so their experiences and thoughts as they prepare to return to their own campuses. And the balance between the immediate needs and the reality that this is a monumental moment for institutional transformation, including an opportunity to advocate for those students too often left behind in this movement. CCA prides ourselves on being the megaphone to highlight what issues we have seen and are encountering and what we can do to address those concerns. And so I'll turn it over to our panelists to go ahead and introduce themselves. If you could, please share your name, institution or organization, your title, and some of the responsibilities within your role.
Okay, well, I'll jump on in. My name is Heather Housley, and I am the Assistant Vice President for Student Engagement at Georgia State University in Atlanta. And I represent different areas at the university, so I oversee international student and scholar services. And in fact, that's where I spent about 20 years of my professional career, so that's where I have the most knowledge. But I also oversee the Multicultural Center, leadership programs, civic engagement, and new student orientation.
I'm Brian Mitra. I'm the Dean of Student Affairs at Kingsborough Community College, part of the City University of New York, located in Brooklyn, New York. My portfolio consists of a lot of the student support services ranging from athletics, working with our special populations like accessibility, veterans, our Black Male Initiative, student conduct and community standards, our trio student support services and accessibility services. So a wide range of responsibilities. And really happy to be here with you guys today.
I'm Melanie Carter, and I'm happy to be here as well. I'm Associate Provost for Undergraduate Studies at Howard University in Washington, D.C. I'm also Associate Professor in Educational Leadership and Policy Studies. I oversee the Office of Undergraduate Studies at Howard, and that unit consists of several programs, including the Center for Academic Excellence, and we focus on advising. We have an orientation and transition and transfer, which focuses on orientation and transfer student support, and also other supports to students who are from specific populations that may need additional support. We also have an Honors and Scholar Development Program in the Office of Undergraduate Studies, and we also have Career Services, which we now call the Center for Career and Professional Studies. Also, my role, I oversee general education and so forth. I teach in the leadership department. I teach history of education, higher education, as well as I teach a new course in Black women in higher ed leadership. So.
Well, I'm Kameron Smith, a rising senior at American University in Washington, D.C. I'm a journalism major. Also, I'm a 7-year Air Force veteran, and I intern with CCA here in the comms department. Mahi, I think you're still on mute.
I'm muted, okay. That happens a lot. Hi everyone, my name is Mahalissa Gallo. I'm a rising senior at Quinnipiac University in Connecticut. I'm majoring in journalism with a minor in political science, and I'm also interning with CCA as a communications intern.
Perfect. Thank you all for joining us today. Kameron's going to kick it off with our first question to the panelists. Again, I encourage everyone to send questions in the Q&A box and engage in comments in the chat function. I think you're muted, Kameron.
Everything at once just popped up into my Zoom window as soon as you called my name. I'm so sorry about that.
It's okay.
I'd like to open up with the first question, and that will be addressed to all panelists. And I'm going with, what do you see as the most critical issue facing the higher education as a result of the pandemic and the racial unrest that has consumed the nation?
Well, that's a big question. And so I'll try to respond. So what are some of these most critical issues? Well, certainly I think health and safety. I think beyond everything else, we're in the midst of a pandemic and people are really, lives are at stake. And so I think that's the biggest issue right now, trying to figure out how to make sense of what we all have to move through, whether that be in higher education or wherever we are, and deal with a global pandemic that is really, affecting all of us in a myriad of ways. So I think that's the most critical issue, and how we address it is going to be critically important as we move forward in a whole host of ways. So that would be my response.
I would have to piggyback off of that as well. I think, understanding our institutions. So for instance, at a community college, many of our students look at the institution for support services, whether it's a food pantry, whether it's mental health counseling, or whether it's just engagement with community, right? So really kind of understanding the students you're serving or the population you're serving, and really seeing how we can meet those needs. I think that's one of the most important things. So whether it's having the tough conversations around social justice, or being open for resources like a food pantry for our students. I mean, these are some of the things that, constantly we think about, and it's really understanding the populations that you're working with and the resources that are available.
Thank you.
I would agree as well. I think that obviously health and safety is the biggest factor, but with all these obstacles that have been put in the path of our students, how do we still help them to move forward toward that ultimate goal of graduation? That's why we're here, is to get students to their academic dream of getting to graduation. So how do we support our students in so many different ways that they need right now, so that they can still continue to move forward? That's our biggest challenge, and where I think we're spending so much time, in addition to obviously the health and safety issues that are paramount.
Thank you. I appreciate all of your answers.
Okay, so I can kick it off with the next question. What were some of the key factors that helped to influence your decision-making for the fall semester and the future semesters?
So I think for us, we're still waiting to receive guidance, because of our location in New York City and the boroughs. There's a lot of different guidance that comes along from the governor and New York State and things like that. So I think it really is understanding how all that fits together and what the domino effect is. And I think, as mentioned before, it's ultimately about health and safety, right? Of not only our students, but our faculty and staff as well, right? So I think, we're still waiting to hear back. There's been some guidance, but how do we communicate that guidance not only to the students, but also to the faculty and staff is critical. And I think that's something that as soon as we get information, we want to make sure that our folks know about the information. So when they're talking to our students or we're doing announcements, everybody's on the same page. And I think that's just key, that communication piece of it. But we're still waiting to kind of figure it out.
And I think I agree so much. And I think also in this space, we have to really be somewhat comfortable with ambiguity, because the truth is everything is fluid, everything is changing. We are meeting with parents and students daily, and we have these webinar sessions to talk with them. We try to respond to questions as best we can, because we do have a reopening plan, but it's a plan contingent upon, changing advice and mandates, et cetera. And the fact is that in this, where we are today in the world, and certainly in our cities and in our areas, we have to be ready to adapt. So a part of the plan is making sure, one, again, health and safety is first, and also that we serve our constituency. One of the things that at Howard, our president has been clear about is that not only certainly health and safety comes first, but also we have students who rely on our institution in a variety of ways. And we have to be able to put that at the forefront of our thinking as we think about this as well. And so how we open, when we open, what opening looks like is based upon a variety of factors, and our ability to really just realize that much of this we don't have a lot of control over. We've got to know that whatever decision we make, we're making it in the best interest of our communities, staff, faculty, students, everyone, our community. But it's difficult. It's a difficult time, and I think it's very important that we always acknowledge that, because sometimes in the midst of all of our Zoom meetings and all the things we're doing, we forget that there is a pandemic happening, okay? And it's very serious. And so I think that's how I would respond to that question.
And I think I would echo a lot of what Brian said. Here in Georgia, we are a part of the university system of Georgia, so a lot of our decisions are made for us by a higher level of leadership, and so we take that and then translate that for our campus. But in terms of the things that we can control, we've been trying to think about how we can take this opportunity to make sure that students understand more clearly where they can get answers to their myriad of questions, and how they do access the different resources that we know they need from the university beyond just academic, like you mentioned. And so we like our silos here in higher education, and so we've been trying very hard to bring our areas together so that we can be more collaborative and speak more consistently about how students can get help. So instead of students going to one office to ask for scholarship information and another for pantry information and another for emergency housing, we've taken this opportunity to try to, for example, bring all those resources under one request process, so that students only have to tell their story one time, and then we can connect them with all the different resources that they may need. So we've been trying to focus on the things we can control, since there are a lot that we can't.
Okay, thank you so much.
So this question is to all panelists again, and I've heard everyone speak to the population you serve, knowing your constituents. So how are you all engaging with the stakeholders, i.e. the students, professors, and adjunct professors as well, around the policies that are impacting student retention and completion throughout this COVID?
For us, we've been hosting town hall meetings for especially for students, specifically on the student affairs side. Our president and the senior staff has jumped on. We try to host that once a month for students, and we invite them different times, different days. I also host a series of Dean's Dialogues with special populations, so I may focus it on our student athletes, our opportunity programs, but I try to do that at least once a week, just to be there to answer questions and disseminate information, and understand what the concerns are, because I think sometimes decisions are made without truly understanding the impacts. And I think that's why it's so important, especially now, to really engage with, for me, my constituents as students, and really kind of have a better understanding of what the needs are. So when we talk about reopening or we talk about shifts in our services, we're able to meet the needs rather than assume what the needs are. So that's what some of the ways that we've been doing it over at Kingsborough.
And at Howard, for example, we've had a series of town hall meetings, with students, faculty, staff, and so again, an opportunity to hear their voices and to make sure they're included. Also, the reopening plan was really developed out of a series of committees that were comprised of members of the campus community, again, from all those groups and others. And so students were involved in the committees, they helped to draft the recommendations and so forth. And so it has been quite an inclusive process, and want to make sure, and also this issue of, as you said, retention and completion, because this really is about that as well, because making sure that students, as was said earlier, they're here, students come to university to get a college education, to begin a process and complete it hopefully at the end of 4 years. And so we want to make sure that any policies that we put in place support that goal, and that our students feel that know that the university is doing what it needs to do in order to support that. So we've been very inclusive in the decision making, and folks have been a part of that. Absolutely.
We also have been doing town halls, like you mentioned. It seemed like before, when we were all on campus, we could never get 500 members of our division all in one space together, and that was always a frustration, right? But now suddenly that we're all virtual, we do that, it seems like, every month. And so that's been an opportunity that's been nice. But also, there's a group of about 30 administrators at Georgia State that meet daily to talk about all the changes, the issues, the questions, that it's just such a dynamic time that we're in. And by bringing together folks from all across student affairs and student success and enrollment management to address these major questions and challenges, we're casting a wide net and being able to come up with solutions that maybe if you're just talking to a certain number of people, you may not be able to find nor gain consensus on. So I think that's been helpful for us. And then also data is key. And so our student stakeholders are most important. So I know as we're thinking about coming back in person, we actually sent out a chatbot question to our incoming and then continuing students about what type of classes do you prefer when you come back? What instructional mode do you prefer? And it was interesting to see how, of course, the incoming students much more preferred to have in-person classes when they come back, but it's stepped up to where the seniors are preferring more of the online. So we'll be taking that into consideration as we go back to the academic departments and continue planning what will be offered, if there are any changes to be made, et cetera. But using data and then meeting a lot. That's how we've been trying to engage our stakeholders.
If I could just add to that, it's also important to engage our respective staff. I think far too often we have these large meetings, but I think, our support staff is the backbone of our office. So it's important to get them included in the conversation. So we requested opportunities to speak to specific offices, just to answer questions or just to create a space, where they feel included in kind of the conversation or the questions they may have, because sometimes what happens is that information gets trickled down 2, 3, 4 times over. So why not host a space, to really have our staffs engaged and really kind of think through that. So I found that to be successful as well in terms of just even popping in to check in. I think that's an important piece as well.
Thank you for that. Now I'll toss it off to Mahi.
Okay, so these following questions are for Heather specifically, but if Brian and Melanie want to answer also, please feel free to chime in. So since the pandemic has a very unique impact on international students, what specific considerations have to be made for international students on your campus?
Great question. And of course, this is so timely with international students being in the news because of the new guidance from ICE that came out last week and all the lawsuits that have followed. But it is so important that we really consider our international students and understand that their support systems are not here. While they have developed support systems in the US, they have most of their family and friends overseas, and they have challenges that go beyond what our domestic students experience. So while we have the international student offices that are there to support international students want to hear from more than just the ISSS office. They want to know that other parts of the university care as well. And so I think it's really important that we connect our international students with ISSS, that they know who to go to for any and all questions. The ISSS folks are their advocates. They're the main ones who can really empathize and speak for those students. But beyond that, I think we also really need to be careful to communicate fully about how our international students can connect with the healthcare system in the US during this pandemic that is so scary, how to use the insurance plans that are frequently offered through the university. And as we all know, that the healthcare system here in the US is confusing, probably for most of us Americans. Imagine how confusing it is to international students. So we really do need to work very hard to make sure that they understand how to access that during this scary time.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Brian, this next question is for you, sir. And I'm asking, what resources do you anticipate students using more during COVID in the fall semester?
I think, it really is, once again, just understanding who your population is, right? And one of the things that we have seen over this past couple of months is the needs for device and internet access from our students. The City University of New York purchased about 30,000 different devices for its students. And we still have students asking for devices. Many of our students are using their mobile phones and things like that. So I think that's just something that we need to make sure that we're still having the conversation around, not only the device, but access points. We know that many of our students are living in homes where there are 3, 4, 5, 6 different family members that need a computer, right? So how do we make sure that, yes, we want to go distant, but how do we make sure our students are going to be successful? So, working with local organizations, to create hotspots and things like that, that's going to be an important continuing conversation that we have. And then also recognizing that our faculty and staff too have needs. At a community college, distance learning really isn't necessarily the highlight, right? Online courses, that may only appeal to a certain amount of students. So really we had to shift in a couple of days and really help our students get the resources they need. And I think it's a conversation we're still continuing today. And I think that's just going to be as we move to the fall semester. We're in our summer module right now. Incoming students are asking the question about devices, and things of that nature. So that's one of the things that we've noticed in terms of our end. And I think the other thing is just the question of, is it going to be on campus or off campus? And I think that's one of the things we just don't know. Students have also been asking about the health and safety measures, right? What is the campus going to look like? Who's doing temperature checks? What if somebody's not wearing a mask, right? So I think those are some of the things that are coming up throughout this whole reopening conversation and the process that we see.
Thank you.
Okay, the next question is directed towards Dr. Carter. How do you keep the focus on college completion, which is needed more than ever, in the midst of a pandemic, protests, and a presidential election?
Yeah, that's a real challenge. But I think that we all know that how important it is to complete the degree once they've started. And so I think that most people realize that there's a real return for them in terms of degree completion. Most of our students have invested greatly in their education. Even the incoming students certainly have in terms of time, effort, money, many of them. And so one thing is that this is, this is a marathon, and certainly we hope it's a 4-year one. But they have to certainly pace themselves, know that we're in a different kind of space and time with the pandemic, with all the unrest and everything that's going on. They're not distractors, but they are important points in history that we don't want to ignore or miss or minimize. But also you have to have a goal in mind and stay on that path. So, and the university has to do, in our communities, we have to do whatever we can to help support our students through this, because we can't expect anyone to ignore what's going on. We can't ignore it. Our students can't ignore it. Our country cannot ignore it. So we can't ignore it. What we can do is provide tools and strategies to move through this space in a way that will help us to meet our goals. In the end, we'll all be all the better for it. So a part of that is making sure that we have accessible and available resources, that this whole moment doesn't exacerbate inequity. And so we have to really focus on the equity question, making sure that folks have access to devices, that those people who don't have access to internet services, that we work with communities and neighborhoods and other institutions to make sure that students have a place to go to actually connect with universities, that we make sure that faculty members are sensitive and educated about online teaching and what that means in terms of access and accessibility and success, and what that looks like in an online environment. So we have to be open, we have to listen, and we have to also be mindful that this period is a time of significant change, that we're all a part of it. And we have a responsibility to, again, not ignore, minimize it. I don't expect our students to act as if the world around them isn't changing, and they have a responsibility to engage in that change. But again, also they have to invest in their future, and it's, again, steady and true. Look toward the goal and look for the resources and support to help them to get there. And we have a responsibility to our students to amplify, the term you all use, that the resources that can help them be successful on that path.
Okay, thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. So we'll shift gears. We have tons of great questions coming in the Q&A, and people want to hear from our student panelists. And so I'll open the floor with a question to Mahalissa and Kameron. What would you like to see this fall? Do you want to be back on campus? And what will you miss the most about being remote if you are returning to your campus in person?
Honestly, I am looking forward to going back on campus. Like, the hybrid model is acceptable for me, but I prefer like full online, because when I chose my institution, I not only chose it because of the value of the education, but because of the resources they offer me. Like, here in my home, I don't have a computer lab, I don't have a software editing room. So for me to not have access to those things aren't conducive to my education, especially in a time like this where financial success is pivotal and people are losing jobs now. Like, I'm a working adult, so I'm also worried about job perspectives as I'm worried about going back to the fall campus. And I'm also worried about internship opportunities and whether my GI Bill or not will cover certain aspects of my education field. But I'm most looking forward to like just learning new things and being able to apply that in my life. And what I'm least looking forward to, like leaving the comfort of my home, like the long nights, like classes that end at 10:30 and I still have an hour commute via metro just to get home. I am not ready for that.
Okay, so yeah, same thing with Kameron. I'm really excited to go back to campus, more because I definitely prefer like a in-person classes over the online classes. I don't know, like these Zoom like thumbnails of all my classmates and my professors just didn't seem like I was actually in class. And, you know, I pay all that like so much money to go to my campus so that I have those resources and I have access to my professors and like the other resources that my university provides, like the mental health resources, the counselors and the psychiatrists that are on campus, as well as the student orgs that they have on campus. So I'm really excited to be on campus. And if it ends up being a remote semester, I'm not gonna be happy about that, because like, first of all, I am an international student, so that would mean that I would have to go back home. So that's gonna be a lot more difficult in terms of like time zone and figuring out how I'm gonna attend my classes. So I'm really excited for it to be in person or like a hybrid semester.
Perfect. Do you have, or how can your university staff help to ease your anxiety or your apprehensions as you prepare to return to campus? And then after this question, I'll open it up for our other panelists to ask you questions and engage with the Q&A.
What would I like to see from the staff? Honestly, the newsletter, I feel personally the newsletter cuts it for me because I'm an avid reader. However, visuals of like the changes, what does the classroom setting look like before I make my option if I want to do hybrid or online? Because if I'm sitting 16 feet from the next person in class, then maybe I might as well just sit at home by myself, who knows? So I'd like to see how the things function, like a quick video of the campus changes. What does the CAF look like? How does the library operate now? So like what buildings are now like only limited entry, things of that nature, like a quick visual or infographic would have helped me a lot in that aspect.
Yeah, kind of like similar, but I think that I would feel a lot better about going on campus. Like I'm worried about how it's going to be with like COVID and also the racial unrest that's been going on in the country. I think it would help if universities were more transparent about their decision-making process, because I would rather them, you know, like my institution send me an email like every week updating us on their decisions that they're making, rather than sending us an email like once a month, kind of leaving us like in the dark. And students, you know, like I think institutions have to be mindful of the fact that like international students have to plan their travel arrangements months before they actually travel, because plane tickets are expensive. And they also have to be mindful of like the adults that are returning to campus, because if they have a family, if they have kids, like a job, they can't just drop the day job that they have to just go attend classes once again. So I think that if universities were more transparent and very regular with letting us know what decisions they were making, then that would make me feel a lot less like stressed or anxious about the coming semester.
Well, I'd like to add a caveat to that, because I am one of those students that get an email at least once a day or twice a day. And I feel like they should hold their horses a little bit, because on Monday you told me one thing, and then Thursday you told me something different, and then the next Monday you're back to something else. So like, I understand I like getting pushed information, but I don't know how to judge this, because everything's changing so fast. I don't think anyone can keep up with it. So it's one of those things we're going to have to put up with until like we get solid advice.
I wanted to point out that in the chat, it looks like the policy change around international students was rescinded. So that's exciting, and that's floating around in the chat box. I did want to point that out for everyone that's attending today. One question that's come up in the Q&A related to communicating with students is, do you have a communications formula that encourages engagement, helps with anxieties, or what are your plans for that at your institutions? For Heather, Brian, or Melanie?
So we started off a weekly newsletter, because we recognize exactly what our students were talking about just now, about the amount of information, the overwhelming amount of information. So what I asked our directors in student affairs to do was send me any updates, topics, and then every Tuesday I'll send something out to our students, and this way they know they know that there's a source for information. And then we also post it on our website. But I think that's an important piece. Like we said, sending 5-6 communications in a row sometimes is overwhelming. And we know that too, as faculty and staff and folks at work, that your inbox is constantly full. So we try to streamline that process. But I think that's one strategy in terms of working to make sure, one, that for 7-8 weeks now, students know that the newsletter's coming out with hey, what support sessions are available, or things that are happening this week, or student government elections are happening, and you can still participate. So, you know, they're able to kind of find that one source of it for us.
And we've done the same. We've tried to, I like the idea of a newsletter. We have not done that in OUS, for example, or the university. But the university has a reopening plan sort of page, and most of the information about reopening is put there. Because we also struggle with what Kameron mentioned. I mean, we're sending out all this communication, and students are drowning in it. And so really after meeting with students and parents over the course of several weeks, but certainly last week, we intensified our efforts. We have these enrollment management meetings where we bring all folks together to talk. We really identified about 6 questions that people have. If we were able to answer those questions, okay, all of this would stop. And so a part of it is making sure that what we're providing, so this is the information that they need to make decisions. And so funneling, making sure that we're all on the same page with what kind of communications go out, and that we're not sending contradictory information or the same information in a different way, you know, a day apart or even 10 minutes apart. And so that coordination is extremely important. And part of it is too, because we're all consumed. We are just over, we're news fatigue. I mean, we're getting reports every 5 minutes, whether it's from CNN or the radio or this or the newspaper. And so we're just digesting all of this information and trying to make sense of it. And can be overwhelming for all of us. And so the perspective around making sure that we do communicate enough, but not too much, and that we do some refining to make sure that what we share is important. Yeah.
Okay. Do you all have any questions for our student panelists that you would like to ask?
I guess I would just like to ask, where should we meet you? You know, we don't want to keep sending out emails when we know that not all students are as perfect as you two and read your emails every day, right? Sometimes students don't check their email as frequently, and they would prefer other means of communication. So we would like to be able to send communications or engage with students where they are. So where would you suggest? Where do we need to be? Is that certain social media platforms? Do you really prefer emails or texts, or is a website adequate? You know, what's the best way to catch you these days, where you'll actually read it?
I would say it goes against the old adage, but put all of your eggs in separate baskets. One on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, because typically a university is so diverse. You have some students who only check social media. Then you have like some students who are business professionals who only check LinkedIn and Facebook. So I'd say like tailor your message to those specific outlets, those social mediums. And Twitter itself, I don't work for Twitter. I'm not endorsed by Twitter, but Twitter is a valuable tool to use, because I believe you can start threads, you can have Q&A polls, you can get engaged with your constituents, you know, easier level, and a more like not serious platforms where your students don't feel that they need to be in their Zoom professional clothing. They could be out on the move and says, hey, my university posted something, I want to react to this real fast.
Yeah, I agree. I think that social media can be like a really, really vital tool. You can definitely post on Twitter, just like Kameron said, like with polls, or even create threads so like students can go back and check like what the steps were exactly. I also like Brian's idea of like a weekly newsletter. For me personally, I would rather just like get an email like every week and make sure that I'm up to date. And you can keep those newsletters short, like where you can just have like a little like couple sentences blurb of what's happening, and you can link it to the universities or the college's website, so that students, like if they are interested in knowing further, they can click on that link and then go to the article or the blog post, or however you're deciding to share the news. So personally, I think social media like Twitter is a big one, because that's where a lot of college students are currently, and like weekly newsletters, I think those are like good strategies.
I have a question about, you talked about preferred course type, and we did a survey around that and asked students which they preferred. But when you think about online courses and instruction, what if in the ideal or in the best of situations, what would you expect in a class, like an online class?
If it was an ideal situation for an online class, there would be weekly Zoom calls where everyone in the class has to get through. Like I'm big on like peer interaction, so I'd like to hear from other students about what they learned. So if we could do peer groups within certain Zoom features or WebEx features, that would be pivotal. It'll change the way most people think, because if you're not being instructed by your professor while in the classroom, then you're teaching yourself while at home. So your ideas may not be what the text or the material is really getting at. So hearing what other people have come up with and seeing how their thought process differs is informational and conducive to my way of learning. Also, online classes, I would like maybe if the professor set up there an hour after each course, so that you can stay back and ask any questions that you didn't feel comfortable asking like throughout the class, or some other concerns that you have coming up, as well as check-ins, like not a weekly check-in, but like a monthly check-in to see how we're doing. Are we finding the class engaging enough? Like, is there anything that we can do to make this technological change like, work for you as a student? Things of that nature.
Yeah, I think it's really important that like professors keep in contact with their students, like email or like discussion posts, or like we use Blackboard at my institution. So they usually have like announcements that they would put, and we get email notifications asking like, if you guys need anything, please let me know. I think that communication is really important. I also, something that I took a poli-sci class last semester, and the professor, he did this thing where every class he had lecture notes. And if you missed a class, or the classes weren't like required because of the different time zones that students were in, he had lecture notes that were up on Blackboard, so that like if we did miss a class, we can just go up and look at the lecture notes. I think that the lecture notes, the written lecture notes, are way better than the recorded ones, because like if you miss one recorded lecture, then there's like 2 and 3, and they're like an hour 45 minutes long, and it gets really overwhelming, and you're just like, I'm just not going to look at it. So I think like a written lecture notes like would be really helpful professor wise. I think institution wise also, it's just provide like resources for students so that it can feel like they're actually kind of like at a home campus, because for me, just felt like it was an extended summer break. So like there was a lot of loss in motivation. You just, you keep looking at your computer like, I just don't want to do this. It gets overwhelming. So if universities had like just like fun like student org resources, so my university just kept doing like giveaways, so it kept motivating students like, hey, if you attend this like Zoom call with our student org, then you can win like an iPad or something like that. I think would be like motivating.
So I have a question.
There's a, oops, go ahead, it's okay.
So just a question, one of the things that I've been thinking about during this time is our students' mental health, right? And really kind of ensuring that we have resources and spaces and things like that. As students, besides the telehealth, the Zoom sessions, support sessions, and things like that, what other things would you like to see from, your colleges, universities to support your own mental health, getting through, not only the pandemic, but also, some of these conversations of international students, social justice, things like that?
I think that something that would have been really helpful is, I'm not sure how this works, but like I know that a lot of psychiatrists and psychologists aren't allowed to work within like they're only allowed a certain couple of states that they're allowed to work on. So I had to travel from Connecticut all the way to Colorado. So the therapist the counselor I was seeing wasn't able to keep seeing me because of the distance. And I think that if institutions were able to modify that, or like if I'm not entirely sure if it's like an institution or a state-based law, but if institutions were able to like find like a loophole somehow through that, where we can have like at least like telehealth, we can call our counselor, we can't be like counseling, but we can have someone that we can talk to that's part of our institution. I think that would have been really helpful in a remote semester.
Excuse me, can you repeat the question again?
So, just talking a little bit about, mental health of our students and providing supports, what other things would you like to see from, your colleges and universities to continue to provide support for our students' mental health?
That's a strong one, because everybody's mental health is on a different scale. And I don't think there's one basket that we could just call mental health. So I'd say there's different levels for people who are suffering severely from mental health like issues. We should have someone they can, like a program where they can go and talk to someone, and as they feel better, they can reach out to other professionals. Let's say you don't feel comfortable going on your healthcare plan for your university, they can refer you to someone outside or someone that looks like you, because there's a lot of racial tension going on right now. So some people may feel uncomfortable speaking to someone they deem as an outsider or someone they don't see as having their best interests or can relate. So having faces that look familiar to all versions of students is key in that area, as well as knowing that it's a process and that you can't just 2-session me away, which is asinine to start with without the COVID, but that's a different ball game. And just being respectful of the times, because things are different. Mental health takes a stride and it takes a couple steps back. So knowing that the student is also struggling with their mental health, as well as trying to dominate their academic rigor, that's one of the key things. Don't take lightly what the student is saying and try to put it in a box, but look at everything going on, the atmosphere around economics, the atmosphere around racial profiling or racial injustice, the atmosphere around how intense of a school program they're even in. Those are key things I think mental health providers should keep on their forefront, as well as being open to seeing even the smallest of things, because to you it may seem like a small deal, but to someone that may be the worst thing they've ever encountered in their life. So knowing there's a scale of emotion is key as well.
Just to add on what I said earlier and also what Kameron said, I think a specific couple examples of how universities can help students with their mental health is maybe having office hours kind of with the mental health counselors that are on campus, so that they can have an open Zoom a session, and then students can come in and then they can request a breakout room where they have a one-on-one time with the counselor specifically, and the counselor can just be there to listen to them, and then the student can have a good 15 minutes where they just rant about what happened that week. So if they had open Zoom sessions every week with the counselor's office, I think that would be good, and a good way to advertise that is social media, because that's where a lot of college students are. I think another example could be also if the student had a counselor that they were going to consecutively or every week, or had a good relationship with already, then they could send the student weekly emails reminding them of the the tactics and the strategies that students were using on campus, or the counselor was helping them use. So maybe working out or going to yoga. So if the counselor can send them a weekly email being hey, I hope you're doing well, just a weekly reminder that you should for the betterment of your mental health and to make sure that you're okay, make sure you go out and run. So a very personalized message, I think, from the counselor to the student would help them. I personally, I know that would have helped me if I got that from my counselor. So I think that would be a really good way of making sure that students are doing good in a remote semester.
So I'll do one more question from the Q&A, and then we have a wrap-up question for all panelists. Let's see. Where did it go? I'm so sorry. How are you, and we talked a lot about communicating with students and how heavily we rely on technology to do that. How are you engaging with students who don't have access to technology off campus? And also, how are you engaging with incoming freshman students who might not have ever stepped foot on campus before their first day back?
It's a great question. I'll speak to the incoming students. For us, typically we would do an on-campus orientation day, right? Or orientation week. So we really had to pivot that. And what we did was we started a series of kind of piggybacking off my Dean's Dialogue series, where every 2 weeks I'll do a welcome info session to incoming students and kind of offer them an opportunity to come just and spend an hour with me to ask questions. I have a canned PowerPoint that highlights the different areas within student affairs, but then really kind of leave it open for conversation. And then what I've asked the directors in the areas to do is also host these information sessions. So we'll host two of them each week throughout the summer. And I think that's one way of just constant engagement, because I think for us, it is about engagement, right? And we recognize many of the students coming to community college school is third or fourth on their priority list, right? Their parents, they're working full time, etc. So, you know, we want to make sure that we're meeting the needs and hearing from our students. So I think creating spaces like that is important, you know, and we're trying to do that, especially with our incoming students, because, you know, they have a lot of questions, and, you know, we want to, like we said before, make sure that we're able to kind of meet them where they're at, and kind of communicate the latest information we have. As far as students who aren't necessarily engaged, we try to work with their peers, you know, and our faculty to send messaging out to students and on Blackboard and things like that. You know, but it's been a challenge. You know, some students just aren't engaged, and we recognize that too. You know, but we have to constantly think through creative ways, whether, you know, it's our advisor calling them 4 or 5 times just to check in. And, you know, we understand too, it's a crazy time for them. So 3rd or 4th on the priority list now has become 10th or 11th because of life, right? So that constant trying to engage students is something that we're looking to consistently do.
And my area, also undergraduate studies at Howard, we were established to be proactive, high impact, intrusive, outreach, assertive, all that. So we do a lot of outreach to make sure that those students who aren't engaged hopefully will become engaged, but also to identify the barriers to engagement, because there are so many, and certainly in this environment, there are going to be even more. So in terms of students not having able to engage, like for example, making sure the students have, in the spring semester, the university issued devices, mailed devices to many students, and really, you know, try to assess what students, their capacity or capabilities were. And that's also true for faculty and staff too, in terms of make sure that we are really a community and we're concerned about our ability to be a community, what that means and what that looks like. And I also think that in the midst of this, that there's an opportunity here for our students, certainly incoming students, but also returning students, continuing students, that this particular period in higher education, and I teach history of higher education, is unlike anything that we've ever seen before, right? At first, I was saying since the Civil War. I think at this point, we're beyond the Civil War. This really is a complete change in higher education. And even though we're hoping that some things will return, we'll recognize some things, much of what we're doing is going to be changed, even if tweaked, for a very, very long time. But this semester is an opportunity to understand how to build community, even though we're not physically in the same space. And so I think students who are part of this cohort of students who attend a college or university during 2021 have a unique opportunity to really think about this experience and what this experience means for them when no other group has had this experience before. And so there's a lot of lessons we can learn about community, about what it means to be a community virtually or without being in close proximity. And I think it's a great opportunity for us to really think about our identities as universities, our identities as university communities, and we need to know that it's not geographically bound. We know that already. We have many online institutions who have been doing this for many, many years, but we have an opportunity that our universities and our communities should not miss. That this is an opportunity to be a part, we're going to be a part of a group that's not experienced higher education in mass like this before. And we need to be creative and innovative and still hold on to our notions of what community really is. And I think we'll all be the better for it if, you know, we do it in a way that respects who we are and who we want to be.
Thank you for sharing that. So our last question to all panelists, in one sentence, what one piece of advice would you give to students returning or beginning on campus, whether that's virtual or in person, in just a few short weeks?
I'll jump in. So I'm glad I didn't have to follow Melanie in your response there, because I was so inspired. And I do think that we need to aim higher. So in responding to this question, I would say that a quote that I've been thinking about a lot is from Dr. Martin Luther King. Of course, only in the darkness can you see the stars. So I do think that in this dark time, we need to help ourselves and our students find those stars, find those good things, keep their eyes on the stars in their life, the goals, the dreams they have, and try to find what we can that's an opportunity that's good in this space. I think we need to rise to that occasion.
I would just say be flexible. You know, I think that's one of the things that we've constantly heard throughout this time, but you know, being flexible, adjusting your goals and being able to adjust your goals especially for our students sometimes was something that has been constantly talked about throughout this time. You know, but be flexible.
I would certainly love Dr. King, but I would also quote one of my favorite civil rights icons who says, we have enough strong people to do this. So we're going to do it. We're strong and we're going to do this, and we can do that. So that would be my advice. We got collectively, she didn't say that, Fannie Lewis, but she said we have enough strong people to do this. So, all right.
I would say just find your community. I think it's really important that, like now, especially out of, you know, all of the times that we rely on the friends and family that we have right now. And so make sure that once you get to campus, or even if you are having like a hybrid or in-person classes, make sure you find your community, whether you're a returning student or a new one. Make sure to find your niche group of friends that you can rely on for anything, because once you're on campus, that's going to be your chosen family, because you're going to be living with them for the rest of the semester. So make sure that you find your community, and make sure that you are around people that you can rely on and talk to about honestly whatever.
My advice is going to sound so cliche because this is how I live my life, but I usually just tell people to breathe. Like, the tough times are here, breathe, think strategically, and we'll get through this. Like, the F on your paper doesn't mean you're going to the penitentiary. Like, just because you didn't get an A+ 4.0 doesn't mean you're going to die tomorrow when you graduate. You'll survive. Just breathe, take your grit and stride, and keep on pushing. That's all I have.
Perfect. I want to thank all of our panelists today. This was amazing. There's tons of opportunity, tons for us all to do. I encourage everyone that's on to speak with students, get their advice, share their insight. A copy of this webinar will be on our website and will be included in the email with the evaluation. So please feel free to share it with everybody. We would appreciate your feedback in the evaluation. That takes about 5-10 minutes. And we'll be sending that in the next couple of days. We have another webinar scheduled for next Thursday, June 24th at 3 p.m. Eastern time. And it will be an open conversation like this one, but with accreditors. And that will be led by our Chief of Staff, Dr. Danifu Elston. So we encourage you to visit the same website to sign up for that webinar as well. And please let me know, let any of us at CCA know if you have any questions. I will share the Q&A questions with our panelists and gather their feedback, and we'll respond via email to those as well for the questions that we didn't get to. But thank you again for joining us today for CCA Live.